Welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw, here today with news about the wildly popular Salem Art Fair and Festival moving from summer to fall. Same location, Bush Pasture Park, but now held the second full weekend in September. Now this year that's September 13th through the 15th, and we'll learn more about that soon, but first, what happened? Why the change on this, the festival's 75th anniversary? Well, here with us is Matthew Boulay, Salem Art Association Executive Director, who made the decision to move the fair to the fall. Welcome. Thank you for being my guest today, Matthew.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Well, all these years, the festival was held in the summertime.
Right.
Why the change to the fall?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a big question. You know, and it really comes down to getting feedback from our visitors and our vendors and our volunteers. So a little bit of history. We were closed for 2 years during the pandemic. There was no art fair. And then when we reopened, we moved the footprint of the festival slightly from underneath the trees in the park to out into the pasture. And the reason was the city had a new management plan for the park that prioritized protecting the trees. And so we are happy to move. I always say, what artist doesn't love trees? First thing we drew as kids was a tree or a flower. But when we moved away from the trees, we lost the shade. So there was a lot more exposure to direct sunlight. So the last 2 years, the #1 complaint was about the heat. There were lots of compliments. It was good fair, but the complaints were about the heat. And the scary thing is that the high temperature each of those 2 years was only 83 degrees. And while you're standing in the sun at 83 degrees, that's a lot of heat. But we know from Oregon summers, Oregon summers can be in the high 80s or the 90s or even the hundreds. And so we were really concerned that future art fairs might get really too hot for folk. So what we did was a survey. We put out a survey after Art Fair last year, as far and wide as we could. We distributed it, and we got about 600 responses, which is a big number. 600's a lot. Yes,
it is. Now we're talking artists and vendors and
volunteers,
yep,
yeah. Sponsors. I mean, everyone in our network of art fair folk, which is thousands of people. We got about 600 responses, and across all of those groups, vendors, volunteers, artists, visitors, the #1 priority suggestion was to move it from July to September. And it was 80% of the respondents said strongly move it. And so, you know, I think Oregonians would rather risk a little bit of rain in September than heat in July. So this will be the first year, and we're excited.
What they were protecting, apparently, were white oaks. Yeah. They're iconic.
Yeah, they're beautiful. And during the ice storm of a couple of years ago, the white oaks, the old growth trees in the park, were damaged by the ice. And that sort of increased the urgency of finding solutions. This was a plan that was in progress, how to protect the trees, but the ice storm really sort of dramatized how important it was. One of the trees that fell during the ice storm, this is amazing, was 370 years old.
370?
Incredible. And so they can't date trees with specificity until they're actually fallen, and they essentially count the rings. So this one fell in the ice storm, and they dated it, you know, or they aged it to 370 years. And again, like, we're happy to do our part to protect the trees. I mean, it just makes sense for all the right reasons, but it requires some adjustments, and the move to September is one of those adjustments.
Last year, that also meant moving people more into the open areas to protect the trees. How did that go?
I mean, it was a essentially a mixed bag, really dependent on the weather. During the morning hours, being out in the pasture was really pleasant and comfortable, and during the evening hours. But in those hot afternoon hours, it really became too much for folks. We spent a lot of effort trying to provide some protection from the heat. So we bought tens of thousands of dollars on free water. We had cooling stations with air conditioning. We had fans with misters, lots of tables, chairs, umbrellas, and all of that helps. But it's Mother Nature. She wins out in the end.
Well, how long is this tree saving going to last? I mean,
I think it's a permanent part of the city's approach to managing the park. And it's not just Bush Pasture Park. It's they have a plan for all of the parks, and so we're working with the city now on kind of a long-term approach to planning the fair. So it's not just year by year, but how do we think 3 or 5 or 10 years ahead so that we can stay in the park with the festival but continue to protect the trees.
And are the odds favoring that?
Oh, I think they are. I think, as you mentioned, this is the 75th anniversary of Art
Yes.
Fair, and it's always been in Bush's Pasture Park, and it feels like home. Our galleries are there, our headquarters, our offices, and so it feels like the right place to hold the fair. We just got to figure out the right way to do it so that people are comfortable and can enjoy it in good weather.
Flash back to this year's event.
Yeah.
How have you got it arranged? Have you made any changes?
Yeah, a number of changes. We're starting an hour earlier, and that's something that artists and visitors have asked us for. When we have started in the past, there'll be a line of 50 people waiting to get in. Some early bird shoppers who want the art. And so we're opening now at 9. We're opening the gates at 9. That's one big change. We have essentially one main stage for all the performers, and we can talk about the entertainers in more detail. But in years past, we had a cultural stage and a main stage. And for a bunch of reasons, it felt that everyone would have a better experience if we have one main stage. So that's a change. We have a wine court for the first time.
Oh, a wine court?
A wine court. We have 6 wineries coming. And really, we think the pairing of art and wine is a wonderful pairing. A few years ago, Time magazine said the Willamette Valley is the next Napa Valley, meaning there are something like 700 or 800 new vineyards over the last 10 or 15 years in the Willamette Valley. And that's a connection we really want to nurture. Have a glass of wine, walk around the fair, look at the art. That feels like something everyone can enjoy.
Did you have to make any accommodations for the movement of people amidst vendors and booths and things like that? Any structural changes?
Yeah, I mean, we're always...
Is it going to look or feel different is what I'm really
It'll
asking.
feel a little bit different. And for folks who came the last 2 years, they'll remember that the main stage was kind of right in the middle of the pasture, right in the middle of the field. And this year we've moved the main stage south, so it's at the southern tip of the fair. And I think that'll give a more unifying sort of experience for the event and allow people to sort of, it's a big field, it's a big festival, so it'll allow people to sort of find their place as they navigate all of these vendors and artists.
And what about this almost surround sound of music that you've talked about?
Yeah, we're really excited by the music. I mean, it's 3 full days of programming. In the evenings, we have big name performers. We can talk about them. During the day, we have like Irish dancers and Scottish performers, and just a huge variety of different acts that we think will appeal to, to folks of all ages and of all musical interests.
And the cultural community that you talk about, what is that about?
Yeah, I mean, these are mostly Salem-based community groups who, in many cases, will offer dance lessons and dance classes in a cultural tradition. So the Irish, the Céilí, Irish dancing is one of the most popular every year. They've performed with us for years. Throughout the year, they're a group of Salem residents who dance once a month at the American Legion Hall, and so part of their performance is entertainment at Art Fair, but there's also an element of education. This is what Irish dancing is. If you want to learn more, if you want to come to a Céilí, if you want lessons, here's our information. So it is a community building event as much as it is entertainment.
And the children's stage.
Yeah.
And something just for children and kids. What have you got?
So we have
entertainment?
Yes, we have a whole children's area, and one of the best things we've done is made all of those activities free. So in years past, parents will remember, if a child wanted to make a craft or face painting, it would be 2 or 3 or 4 tickets, and each ticket, cost $1. And coming out of the pandemic, in which children had experienced so much isolation, it was hard on everybody, but I think the pandemic was particularly hard on children. We really wanted to do something special for children. So we have sponsors, MAPS Community Foundation and Mountain West, and Epping Family Foundation that have made the children's area free. And so kids can come in, they can get as many activities as they want, it's all free. There's going to be a clown, there's a performer, a series of performances. There's fiddle lessons. We have 25 fiddles that will be available to kids, and along with lessons. So, just lots of fun things that incorporate what we like to think of as all types of art: musical art, craft, making paintings.
But what's so neat about that is that you don't know what's going to inspire a young person to go, ooh, I like that, and maybe even pursue it.
And that's what you want to give kids, all these different experiences. And somebody over here will fall in love with a fiddle, and someone over here will fall in love with finger painting or something else. And that's what that's a great metaphor for the whole experience, is so many different types of art, types of music, types of food, beer and wine and coffee, that you can sort of find your own way to something that's fun.
And the artists are there. What kind of artwork what categories of art?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have this year about 200 artists, an incredible
Whoa, that's
group.
a lot.
It's a lot of artists. We have about somewhere around 350 apply every year, and so it's a very selective process. We have a jurying process, and so we're really excited that the artists that show in Art Fair are really high quality, top-notch, experienced artists, but across all medium. So there will be jewelers, there will be painters, there will be sculptors, folks who work with glass, folks who work with clay. I mean, again, it's really meant to provide this sort of wide-angle lens on what art means. And everything's for sale, and there are lots of different price points.
Any digital art?
There will be digital art. In fact,
wait a minute, really?
Yeah, and in fact, our poster this year. So every year, there's an art fair poster, a commemorative poster. And this year, for the first time, it's been created by a digital artist, a young woman from Salem, who tells us, she grew up as a kid coming to the art fair, and it shaped her approach to art. Her name is Sophie. She was selected to make our poster this year, and it's a really fun, you know, sort of colorful, filled with people poster. I think folks will like it.
Every one of your fairs is a learning experience. What excites you about this one?
Really, the move to September is a big deal, and it's exciting. It's a little nerve-wracking. I mean, when you do something for 74 years in July, you know, and then you move it to September, I think we did it for all the right reasons, and I think there's a lot of community support. But it's still a challenge getting the word out, letting everyone know that these are the new dates, September 13, 14, 15. And so we ask folks, you know, to help us just spread the word. Tell your neighbor, tell your family members, tell, you know, classmates or colleagues, just help us spread the word. I think that September will be a very popular time of year going forward.
Where can you get tickets?
Yeah, tickets can be purchased in two ways. One is online. Our website is salemartfair.org. And then also at the gate. Folks can just show up. They can pay with cash or credit card. All of our members, Salem Art Association members, get in for free. There's a discount for senior citizens. There's a discount for veterans. There's a discount for teenagers. Children 13 and under are free. And anyone carrying an Oregon Trail card can come in for free. And so what we usually say is, if you're able to pay, please do. We're a nonprofit, and your ticket purchase supports art in our community. But if for whatever reason you're not able to pay, well, please come anyway. We welcome you. We want everyone to experience the art. That's what our mission is.
I'm going to shift gears back to those white oaks and just the look of the Bush house, the gardens, the sense of history of the place.
Yeah.
And I know that the Salem Art Association started in 1919 under a different name. Could you give us a sense of the history of your organization?
I mean, what a history,
just a thumbnail
right?
sketch for people who don't know.
It's 100 years old, as you say. It's older than that. There are two city-owned buildings that we work in and are open to the public. One is what we call the barn. It's the Salem Art Association's exhibition galleries. There are 4 galleries. There are constantly rotating shows. We have an incredible show opening next week about indigenous art, contemporary indigenous art from Oregon. It'll be a really wonderful show. And the second building is the historic Bush House Museum. So Asa Bush and his family built the house in the 1870s. 150 years ago. The house has been extraordinarily well preserved. There's original wallpaper, there's original furniture. The structure of the house itself, you know, is many rooms with grand fireplaces, high ceilings. I mean, it's just a beautiful museum. It's a beautiful example of how a very affluent family from that era lived. But we've been curating it. Inside there's a collection of about 1,300 objects. There's original, you know, candlesticks on the mantelpiece, original rocking chair, desk. And then we've created a new series of artists, of art, celebrating individuals from early Oregon history. And in this case, we've begun with Oregon Black pioneers. So these extraordinary portraits by an Oregon artist of folks who were instrumental in the early years of Oregon statehood, but have been overlooked by history, you know, because of their skin color. And so this is a way to reimagine the way we tell history through art, through portraits in Oregon.
Black pioneers, what was their story? How did they get to Oregon?
I mean, it's a series of extraordinary book that documents their history is called Perseverance, and it really captures, the title captures this idea of being a black Oregonian in the time when the state of Oregon was unfriendly to black Americans or to black Oregonians, and there were a series of laws that really intentionally discriminated against blacks in the state. And so Perseverance captures these stories, you know, and many of them came on the Oregon Trail. Many came from the South in the years after the Civil War. And they were, you know, homesteaders, shopkeepers, you know, family members. I mean, they lived lives like other Oregonians. And that's what this series of portraits captures, that in a sense their perseverance, their story is extraordinary. And in a sense, it's just part of the fabric of the American story.
Very much so. You were talking earlier about the indigenous artwork. Mm-hmm. There were people here before it was Oregon, or even Oregon Territory, and remain. And they have their story to tell.
Yeah, and it's part of why this upcoming show on indigenous art is so important. You know, what we say is that art operates on multiple levels, and on one level it's just a beautiful object to look at. You can look at a painting or a sculpture and it gives you something of beauty. But it also tells a story, and the point you're making is that for indigenous artists, it tells a story of being here for 10,000 years. It tells a story of, you know, surviving in this land, even as you know, white settlers moved in and displaced the indigenous people. And so the art is both part of a creative process by the artist, but part of telling history as well.
And it's lovely to learn, perhaps, from the artists as part of this exhibit, their family stories or their stories?
Yeah, and I think all artists bring their own experience into the art. I mean, their life story. And that's certainly the case with this upcoming show of indigenous artists.
Are you aware of just how much this sounds like you're fostering the art spirit itself in a new generation of young people?
Yeah, and that really is our mission. You know, that we have a huge number of education programs for young people. We have summer camps. We have field trips that sort of sit at the intersection of art and history. We have a program that takes practicing artists and places them in schools to teach art, so that the students are receiving instruction from professional artists, teaching artists. And art, you know, art comes naturally to so many young people, to kids. They just start making things without calling it art or having been trained. And that creative spirit, you know, I think it's part of the human spirit, and it's certainly something we want to nurture.
You have, you said something about the Art in the Schools program. Has that changed over time?
It has grown over time.
Really?
And
what do you owe that to? You
know, I think it's this thirst for arts education, and many school districts have, for budgetary reasons, cut back on their arts education. They've cut back on their number of art teachers. And so we're able to step in with professional artists and offer these opportunities. I think the program is popular because the folks who are teaching from their own area of expertise, and they're coming with lessons that, you know, really work. I mean, that there's one, for example, where children are sculpting animals, and what they create is extraordinary. And you wouldn't maybe think that young children can sculpt soft stone in such a beautiful way, but the results speak for themselves. I mean, it's really fun.
Where can we see these examples? Do you have actual exhibits of some of the works of art that these children do?
Sure. First of all, our website has opportunities for all of these kids' education programs. We make as many as possible free or low cost, because that's, again, our intent and our mission. There are fees for some, but scholarships are always available. And then every March and April, we have a show called the Young Artists Showcase. And I have to tell you, it is our most popular show of the year by far. We probably have close to 300 artists, all ages, kindergarten through 12th grade. Actually, some even younger. We have preschoolers sometimes submit. It's March and April, and it's a really wonderful show. The walls are filled, floor to ceiling, with art made by children.
Oh, I have to go.
Yeah, it's great. You'll love it.
Thank you. And the adults, what do you have to, are you bringing anything back that you used to have pre-pandemic for adult education and even arts education? Yeah,
it's a great question. We have, since the pandemic, had a number of lectures by artists and historians. We're continuing to ramp those up, which is oftentimes a way for the artist and audience members just to engage in a fairly small setting and talk about the process and the art that's been created. We're, for 2025, planning more studio classes for adults.
Oh.
So these would be, we hope, painting and sculpture, some pottery perhaps. There may be a jewelry making class. But again, there really is an appetite for, for art classes for adults. The art department, which is an art store downtown, offers painting and drawing classes, and they're really, very, very good. And we're hoping to sort of supplement that, offer more opportunities.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Before we close, I would love to hear a little something about the music. Who's headlining?
It's a great question. Let me highlight two performing artists. On Thursday night, which is Thursday the 12th, we have, even before Art Fair begins on Friday, we have what we call an opening night celebration dinner. So that's Thursday, and we're having, for the third year in a row, this incredible singer-songwriter, Haley Lauren. She travels the world. She's from Eugene, award-winning jazz vocalist, and her songs are gorgeous. I mean, she's back for the third year in a row because every year people tell us, bring her back, bring her back. And then at the festival itself, we have a group that folks from the 90s, like me, if you're listening to music in the 90s, might remember. They're called the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. They're big band, they're swing, they're high energy, a lot of fun. And the other new thing, if I can mention it for this year, is Thursday night and Friday night, a 16-minute laser light show and drone show. So if you've never seen a drone show, you can Google it. But we're going to have 75 drones. This is to celebrate our 75th anniversary. The drones will be flown about 350, 400 feet in the air, so above the park. And drones are lit up against the nighttime sky, and they just create the most extraordinary shapes and mirages and colors in the sky. It'll be really fun.
The mind races just thinking about it.
It's actually very wild and almost a very contemporary, almost the newest forms of art, drones dancing in the sky.
This has just been wonderful. Has this been a satisfying year for you? Do you have any sense of what the future could hold?
That's a great question. It's been a wonderful year. I think you know, the years of the pandemic were really hard. The 2 or 3 years coming out of the pandemic were years of growth and exploration and new programming, making new connections with folks and organizations that had been lost because of the pandemic. And the move to September has sort of occupied our attention this year. So it's been a year where we think this big move to September is sort of the last big change. And going forward, it's about doing the same things better, bigger and better with more audience. And as an organization, that's a really nice place to be. The feedback we've gotten for the past couple of years has been really encouraging, really positive, and there's just more room to grow, more artists to show, more people to welcome into our galleries. So it feels good.
And perhaps a hint of rain this time.
At least partly cloudy.
Oh, Matthew, this has been such fun talking to you.
Thank you.
I very much appreciate you being my guest today on InSight. What a load of insights you gave me.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And thank you for joining us today on InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw.